close your eyes now. Let the noise of today fade like mist on morning stone. The world slows, the breath deepens, and through this stillness a doorway opens, not to a place, but to a rhythm older than kings, older than borders, a rhythm carved into mountains, sung by rivers, held in the silence between words. You are entering Iran, not just a country, but a continuum, a land that remembers. This is where fire once spoke to sky, where poets made language taste like rose and flame, where empires bloomed like gardens and vanished like rain. This is a place where time folds gently, where memory lives in tile and myth, where the past is not behind you, but around you. Let it unfold slowly now. Let each name arrive like a footstep in soft earth. Let each chapter find you, not to teach, but to cradle. You are not just listening. You are wandering. Through cities once golden, through deserts that hum with forgotten prayers, through nights lit by stars that guided kings and caravans alike. So breathe, traveler. Sink softly into the cradle of history. Let the story begin, before names, before scripts, before the memory of kings or the measure of nations. There was only the land, and this land, the place that would one day be called Iran, already pulsed with stories, even if no one had yet shaped them into language. You arrive softly now, floating above mountains that fold like sleeping lions, valleys kissed by rivers no longer mapped, and deserts that once bloomed when the rains remembered them. This is not a land that begins with conquest. It begins with earth, with silence, with slow breath rising from stone. You move gently across the Zagros Mountains, where the bones of the world lie close to the sky. In this high place, early humans once carved out warmth from flint, shaped bone into tools, and followed the patterns of migrating animals. The caves here, hidden, sacred, still hold the charcoal fingerprints of hands long turned to dust. Their makers had no kingdom, no alphabet, no flag, yet they belonged deeply to this land. Below, the plains stretch out, fertile and soft in places, wild and dry in others. It was here, more than 12,000 years ago, that the first grains were gathered, emmer wheat, wild barley, not planted yet, but noticed, treasured. You watch a woman kneel, wrapping seeds in woven cloth, humming a rhythm passed down through gesture rather than word. This land does not rush into history. It waits. The great rivers, the Karun, the Karkay, the Zaonde, Rud, meander slowly, carving the land with patience. They are lifelines, not only for drinking, but for dreaming. Along their banks, small villages rise, round huts with reed, roofs hearth, fires flickering, children learning to shape clay not just into pots, but into memory. The first cities are still centuries away, but the idea of place begins here, of staying, of shaping, of returning each season to the same bend in the same stream, and in the staying, a kind of story takes root. You drift now through Tepe Ganjdera and Tepe Siok, the soft mounds that cover forgotten villages, like blankets. Beneath them, archaeologists found the bones of sheep with smaller horns, the jaw of a goat that had learned to live close to humans. Domestication, they call it. But it was not conquest, it was companionship, a bargain, a dance. Even before metal gleamed, this land glowed with beginnings. Fire was sacred, hearths were, circles where families sat, not just to eat, but to remember. Words were few, songs were longer, and the stars, they were closer. In the clear mountain air, Night bloomed like ink across a stretched canvas. People looked up, not just for beauty, but for meaning. You feel their gaze now, upward, open, full of wonder. A sky without names, but not without awe. Somewhere near the Caspian shore, a new sound rises. The ringing of obsidian, traded from far volcanoes. People begin to exchange, not just goods, but stories. A piece of turquoise from the east, a bead carved from seashell. Someone has painted spirals on a bowl, not for function, but for something deeper. For pattern, for symbol, for the joy of making something beautiful. And then, somewhere quietly, someone buries a body with care. Not tossed aside, but laid down, maybe wrapped in cloth, maybe with a small jar nearby. This is more than disposal. It is remembrance. The earliest flicker of ceremony. The idea that the soul might go on, or that the body deserved dignity. That the past mattered. The land listens. You move toward Elam, where in time the first cities will rise, Susa, Anshan. But even now, the seeds of civilization stir. You see outlines forming, paths worn by feet, bricks sun-dried and stacked. The first walls not to keep enemies out, but to mark belonging. This is not yet empire, but it is structure. Still, nature remains the greatest teacher. The seasons change. Mountains swell with snow. Springs break open. The land teaches rhythm, and the people learn to walk in time with it. You descend now into a quiet grove, an oasis along a mountain stream. A group of people sit beneath the shade of a fig tree, passing bread made from crushed grain. There is laughter. A child watches a bird land on a branch and mimics its call. The child's voice, the river's gurgle, the rustle of wind, they blend together into something soft and ancient. Not language, not yet, but close. You realize, even before writing, even before stone monuments, this land remembered. Its memory is not held in scrolls, but in soil. In the curve of a valley, in the gentle way the light touches old rock, in the way wild almonds still grow near the ruins of forgotten gardens. And you, drifting through it all, begin to feel the weight of slowness. This is not the rush of history, but its breath. It reminds you that before all the noise of kings and conquests, there was a long, sacred pause, a stillness in which humanity took its first gentle steps into becoming something more. You walk back toward the mountain pass. The wind is cooler now. The stars are rising again, same stars the ancients saw. Same constellations, though their names have changed. You close your eyes, and just before sleep takes you, the land speaks in its first language, not of letters or empire, but of earth, time, and touch. Before kings carved laws, before swords drew lines, there was land that listened, and people who shaped it, softly, with fire, with seed, with silence. The mountains stretch wide before you, their snow-touched spines glowing faintly beneath a pale blue dawn. Somewhere in these eastern highlands, perhaps in Bactria, perhaps in Persia, a voice begins to rise, not loudly, not in command, but with the clarity of a morning flame. That voice belongs to a man called Zarathustra, or Zoroaster, and he does not come to conquer. He comes to ask that you walk softly now across this ancient plateau. The grass rustles like whispered scripture. Streams gleam like silver thoughts. There are no palaces here, no chariots or monuments, only sky, open, endless sky. It is beneath this dome of stars that a young priest begins to doubt what his elders recite. The chants of many gods, the sacrifices, the endless rituals passed down with unquestioned weight. Zoroaster turns his face to the fire. Not the fire of destruction, but the fire of order. Fire, to him, is not something to fear. It is the visible breath of truth. You find him now beside a small flame altar. The wind does not touch it. He watches its flickering light as though it speaks in a language only the soul understands. In this sacred moment, he hears the first shape of his vision, that there is one divine force, not many, and it moves not in chaos, but in harmony. He calls it Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, and from this whisper of revelation, a new way of thinking begins to unfold, like the petals of a white flower pressed between stone. You walk with him as he wanders from village to village, offering his thoughts like seeds. Choose the good, he says gently, not by fear, but by reason. Truth is the path, right action is worship. People listen, some with wonder, some with doubt. But the message is not complicated. In fact, it feels ancient and simple, as though they have always known. At the heart of his vision lies duality, not a war of gods, but a choice. There is Usher, the path of truth, and Druge, the path of deceit. The world is not a trap, but a test. Not a prison, but a classroom. Humanity is free, Zoroaster says, free to choose, free to think, free to shape the world with thought, word, and deed. You see farmers pausing at sunset to tend the sacred flame. You see children learning not just how to pray, but how to discern. Truth, kindness, and humility are not commandments. They are tools. In this new faith, ethics matter more than offerings, and the divine is not above, but within the light. You wander to a temple, not grand, but precise. Its stone walls face the cardinal points. Inside burns an eternal flame. It is fed not with fear, but with reverence. There is no idol, no carved face, just fire, and the understanding that to keep it burning is to keep the truth alive. Time passes, and the message spreads from hamlet to hill, from fire altar to royal court. It finds favor with the kings of ancient Iran, especially the Achaemenids, who will soon raise empires. But here, in its early glow, Zoroastrianism is still pure flame, untouched by gold or conquest. You sit among followers beneath a night sky where constellations pulse with slow wisdom. Astronomy is sacred here. The stars are not distant, but instructive, lights by which the divine writes its will. They remind you that every soul has a place in the order of things, and every moment is a choice. This is not a religion of submission. It is a religion of balance, of daily action, of sacred intention, of tending to life as one might tend a flame, not too fast, not too dim, just steady. You move now across the centuries. The prophet is long gone, his body returned to the earth, but his vision remains. Fire temples rise across Iran, the eternal flames within them burning through dynasties and dust. Even as empires rise and fall, the fire stays. Even when invaded, even when forgotten by the world, some small village somewhere still shelters its glow. You visit one such temple, now hidden among hills, its door carved low, its walls worn smooth. Inside, a priest tends the flame, alone. He sings softly, not in fear, not in ritualized chant, but in gratitude. The flame has seen everything, and it burns still. Outside, the wind rises and falls. The stars turn slowly above. You lie down, near the temple, warmed by the memory of that fire. You think of how this land, long before it was carved by kings, was already a field of thought, a place where morality was measured not in punishment, but in clarity. Zoroaster did not promise heaven as reward. He promised that doing good would make the world better, that truth would bring light, that intention matters. It is a quiet message, but in the stillness of night it glows, and as you begin to drift into sleep, a thought lingers beside you like an ember at the edge of ash. Some truths do not shout. They flicker in silence, and in the quiet they teach us how to burn, not to destroy, but to illuminate. You are standing at the edge of a vast plain, where the mountains soften into valleys, and the wind carries the scent of stone, earth, and something older, the memory of footsteps that once changed the course of the world, yet left the soil unscarred. The sun is gentle here, casting long shadows over the land of Anshan, an ancient kingdom nestled within Elam's fading glow. This is where he begins, quietly, without crown, without thunder. His name is Cyrus, son of Cambyses, of the Achaemenid line. But long before the world calls him the Great, he is a child watching sheep move in rhythm over hills, a boy learning the skies, patience, and the weight of promises. The land raises him with care, not to conquer, but to understand. You walk beside him now, through gardens where canals thread between fig trees and stone pathways. These are not grand palaces, but modest homes with roots deep in order. The people of Anshan tend the land like memory, deliberate, patient, reverent. Cyrus learns early that to rule is not to command, but to steward. The world is not something to hold by force, but something to carry with care. Far beyond these hills, the empires of the world are loud and fractured, the Medes proud and brittle, the Babylonians wise but heavy with their own splendor, the Lydians shining with gold. And yet their people grow weary. The world waits for a new rhythm, and so Cyrus rises not as a storm, but as a steady wind. First, he unites the Persian tribes, not by bloodshed, but by loyalty earned. Then he turns toward the Medes, not with rage, but with strategy. When they fall, it is not in fire. He marries into their line. He keeps their cities. He respects their gods. And thus, their people follow. You feel the shift. The world does not tremble, but it leans toward him. He marches, yes, but his footsteps plant seeds. When he takes Babylon, he does not loot it. He walks through its gates without destruction. The people greet him with open arms. Their temples are restored, their gods untouched, their culture respected, and from this a new kind of empire is born, not forged by terror, but by tolerance. You walk with Cyrus through Susa, through Ecbatana, through the soft hush of Persepolis in its earliest stones. There is no one capital. The empire is a garden, vast, interconnected, and built with the care of someone who knows that diversity is not a threat, but a strength. He does not erase peoples, he honors them. His scribes write in many tongues. His governors, satraps, are chosen not for their lineage, but for their wisdom. His laws do not demand uniformity. They grant freedom. He is not interested in shaping the world in his image. He wants the world to live in its own beauty, under one protective sky. You pause now at the Cyrus cylinder, that small curved tablet carved in cuneiform, not a boast, not a curse, but a declaration. I returned the gods to their shrines, it says. I allowed the people to worship in peace. These words, etched in clay, echo across centuries as perhaps the first charter of human rights. Not a scroll, not a sword. A promise, baked into earth. Time flows gently, and Cyrus ages. He has built something vast, stretching from the Indus to the Aegean, from the mountains of Armenia to the waters of the Persian Gulf. Yet he walks among his people with modesty. He does not call himself divine. He does not ask for worship. He is king, yes, but also guardian. And when he falls in battle far to the northeast, he leaves not only an empire, but an example. He is buried at Pasargadae in a tomb simple and strong, alone on the plain. No great monument, just stone stairs and silence. You visit the tomb in your dream now. The sun is setting behind it. The wind carries no trumpet, only the soft brushing of grass. The inscription once carved into its face has long faded, but the message still hums in the air. Stranger, I am Cyrus, who gave the Persians an empire. Do not envy me this stone. He built not to impress, but to last. Not to shine, but to shelter. The garden he planted with policy and respect will grow under his heirs, though they will forget some of his gentleness. But for now, you rest beside him, feeling the warmth of his vision still blooming through time. Before you close your eyes, a thought whispers through the stillness. The strongest empire is not the one that conquers, but the one that listens. Not the one that commands, but the one that allows others to remain whole. In that silence, greatness lives. You arrive before dawn, when the stars are still lingering, faintly, like embers, above a great sleeping city. But Persepolis is not sleeping, not really. It holds its breath, carved into stone and time, waiting. The desert around it is quiet. The mountains behind it stand like guardians, and rising from the flatness, almost as if grown from the earth itself, are stairs, terraces, and columns that reach into silence like questions asked in prayer. This is no ordinary city. This is Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of an empire. That once stretched farther than any before it. But it does not boast, it does not shout. It welcomes with symmetry, with calm. You walk slowly up the great staircase, the morning light catching the reliefs along the walls. You are not alone. All around you are stone figures, carved with such gentleness that they seem to breathe, delegates from every corner of the empire, Medes, Lydians, Babylonians, Elamites, each carrying gifts, not kneeling, not chained, but walking with dignity. Their clothes are detailed, their faces distinct. They come not as conquered, but as part of something larger. You feel it, the soft architecture of unity. At the top of the stairs, the gate of all nations opens wide. 2 stone bulls, colossal and calm, stand on either side, neither growling nor charging. They are not beasts of war, they are watchers. They hold the space between empires and eternity. You pass beneath their gaze and enter into the quiet. Geometry of greatness. Columns rise like tree trunks, fluted and tall. They hold up nothing now, but once they held roofs of cedar and gold, imported from distant lands. You walk among their shadows and feel not power, but order, a sacred stillness shaped by intelligence and care. Persepolis was built by Darius the Great, son of Astasipus, successor to Cyrus, and master of stone and vision. He did not build it in haste. This was not a fortress. It was a symbol, a mirror of how the empire saw itself, diverse, elegant, deliberate. Each structure was aligned with the sun, the mountains, the seasons. The land itself was the blueprint. You wander through the Apadana, once a grand hall, with 72 columns, where the king would sit not above, but among the embassies of the world. There were no gladiator fights here, no judgment thrones, just the quiet flow of greetings, offerings, alliances, stone turned into ceremony. Beyond the audience halls lie the treasuries, the archives, the storerooms of a realm that prized administration as much as glory. Clay tablets were found here, thousands written in Elamite and Babylonian and Old Persian, each one a whisper of daily life. Grain delivered, wages paid, workers rotated. This was not bureaucracy. It was memory, organized with care, shaped into permanence. You kneel now before the reliefs of the immortals, the king's elite guards, standing shoulder to shoulder, identical yet expressive. Their robes ripple with motion, their hands hold spears, but loosely, as if they were there to protect peace, not provoke violence. These are not warriors of conquest. They are stewards of stability. All around you, the stones tell stories, not in letters, but in rhythm. The steps rise at a shallow angle, inviting the elderly and noble alike to climb with grace. The carvings curve just enough to catch the sun at midday. Every angle was thought through. Every hall was not just built, it was composed. You sit beneath a column broken by time and imagine a spring day in Persepolis at its height. Music drifting from lutes and flutes, robes brushing against polished stone, the scent of saffron and roasted barley. The Nowruz festival, Persian New Year, bringing together governors and artisans, philosophers and priests. They speak dozens of languages, but share one space, one vision, one empire under many stars. And then you feel the turning. Centuries pass like sand through open fingers. Alexander comes, his armies shimmering under a foreign sun. The city is taken. Drunken pride leads to fire. The halls blaze. The cedar roofs collapse. Gold melts into the cracks of the earth. A library of memory vanishes in smoke, but not all is lost. The stone remains, and now, thousands of years later, it still waits broken, yes, but not silenced. It speaks to you in the cool of evening, when the wind carries dust across thresholds once swept daily by hand. It tells you that greatness does not always survive in glory, but sometimes in stillness. You lie now beside a fallen column, watching. The stars reappear, the same stars that Darius once saw, the same constellations followed by priests who aligned this city with the heavens. Persepolis does not ask for mourning. It does not need praise. It simply is a whisper of stone, a conversation between empires and time. And as you drift into sleep, one thought lingers in the quiet space behind your eyes. The truest language is not written in ink, but carved in rhythm, and some cities speak even after their voices burn. The fire is over, but the smoke still lingers. It rises softly now, not as flame, but as memory. You stand among the blackened stones of Persepolis, where ash has gathered like a second skin across the broken pillars. The wind blows gently, but it cannot erase what happened here. Nor does the earth forget. You are walking through silence, where once ambassadors bowed, now only shadows remain. Where columns reached for stars, now sky spills unhindered through the ruins. Somewhere beneath your feet, gold once flowed, books once whispered, sandals once echoed across polished floors. But all that was lit, all that was made sacred by human hands has been touched by heat. And behind the flame, behind the loss, there is a name. Alexander. He did not come to destroy, not at first. He came as a student of Persia, a lover of Cyrus, a seeker of glory shaped in marble and philosophy. But glory can burn hot. In a night of wine and pride, the torches were raised. The great city was engulfed, not by enemies, but by impulse. And, just like that, centuries of care were consumed in a single flickering gesture. You walk slowly now along scorched staircases, where stone carvings of delegates still carry offerings, unaware that their ceremonial march has ended in flame. They are frozen in devotion, mid-step, mid-breath, as though they never saw it coming. But history does not stop, and neither does Iran. The Macedonians, brilliant and brief, do not know this land as it knows itself. Their maps stretch wide, but their roots remain shallow. After Alexander dies, barely 33, his empire unravels like cloth in wind. His generals quarrel, his statues crack. His name echoes more in foreign mouths than native ones. Here he is remembered not only as a conqueror, but as a shadow, long, dramatic, and passing. You wander into the villages beyond the ruins, where Persian farmers still plant barley by the phases of the moon. They speak not of empire, but of seasons. They whisper of the fire, yes, but more of the return. For even as palaces fall, the culture does not. The language does not. The memory of Zoroaster, of Cyrus, of ancient rhythms, they remain in the breath of the people. It is here, in this quiet persistence, that Iram reveals its truest strength, not in monuments, but in continuity. You follow the path eastward through the deserts, where the sun writes long shadows across salt plains. The Seleucids, inheritors of Alexander's domain, try to rule from afar, building cities in Greek style. But their names do not stick. Their marble crumbles faster than clay. The land nods politely, absorbs their stories, and then gently forgets. Then you reach the mountains of Fars again, where the old Persian blood still runs deep. In hidden valleys, scribes continue to write in their ancient scripts. Fire temples still flicker in the night, and under the stars, elders tell stories of a king named Cyrus who built not with fear but with respect. The children listen. They remember. Time passes, and from this landscape of scorched stone and remembered songs, a new people begin to rise. The Parthians, horsemen of the East, quiet but enduring. But their story is still coming. For now, you are held in the space between empires. The stillness after fire. You lie down near a fragment of column, its surface pitted, its carvings half melted. The air is cooler now. Owls call softly from the hills, and in this hush, you understand something quiet and enduring. Fire can erase buildings, but not belonging. Not culture, not spirit. Alexander's shadow may have passed across Persia, but it did not settle. It could not hold, and as you drift toward sleep, a final thought glows in the dusk of your mind. Empires fall in fire, but memory, true memory, lives in the breath of people who wake each day and begin again. The desert is not empty. It sings in low tones, hums through salt plains and ancient riverbeds, leaves behind whispers folded into sand. You walk now through this dry, endless quiet, not toward a capital or a monument, but toward a rhythm. A new name rises from the heat, Parthia, and like the wind, it does not come all at once. It arrives slowly, steady, quiet, patient. You do not enter a city, you enter a way of life. Long after the Achaemenid palaces burned and Alexander's columns cracked, a people of horse and bow began to gather in the northeast, in the shadowed hills of Khorasan. They do not build roads of marble or raise temples of gold. They ride, they vanish, they reappear. They live by distance, by knowing the curves. of the wind better than the edges of any throne. These are the Parthians, and they do not announce themselves with trumpets. They are born into movement, into open space, into a world where the state is not a shape but a balance. You walk with them now, dust rising gently behind hooves, banners rippling like brushstrokes. They do not call themselves kings first. They call themselves keepers, and what do they keep? They keep borders, they keep trade. They keep the memory of Persia breathing, even in fragment. You pass through Nisa, their capital, not massive, but secure. Earthen walls and storerooms filled with clay tablets, ivory carvings, coins that shimmer with Hellenic curve and Persian weight. In this quiet place, East and West meet again, not in conquest, but in blending. The Parthians are skilled in the art of balance. They do not erase what came before. They do not glorify what they borrow. They absorb, they adapt. The Greek scripts remain, but they soften. The Zoroastrian fire burns, but it shares space with new philosophies. Even Rome, mighty and proud, cannot press into Parthian soil. Their legions try, crossing the Euphrates, armed with pride. But they are met, not with armies in rows, but with disappearance. You witness it now, the famous Parthian strategy. A wave of cavalry rides forward, releases arrows while turning away, then vanishes into the horizon. The Romans call it the Parthian shot, a technique of retreat and attack so fluid it seems more like a dance than a tactic. The land protects its own, and Rome, for all its might, cannot hold it. The Parthians do not win by force. They win by being undrasper. Their empire stretches, but it is stitched loosely, a confederation of kingdoms, satraps, local dynasties. There is no single capital of thunder. Authority travels like a caravan. Kings are crowned with ceremony, but they are never far from the reminder that power here is shared, not ruled from above. It is scattered like stars, each point bright, each line between negotiable. You sit beside a trade route, now part of the vast Silk Road. Camels pass, their bells soft in the twilight. From China, silken tea. From India, spices and gems. From the West, glass and wine. Persia sits at the center, not shouting, just connecting. The Parthians know this is their strength, not domination, but middleness. They are the breathing space between giants. Night falls. The fire is lit. Around you, merchants speak in many tongues, Aramaic, Bactrian, Greek, Parthian, but they understand each other through gesture and price. The stars are brilliant overhead. No palace looms above. No royal decree thunders through the valley, yet the system holds. It holds because it is light. It bends with wind. It survives without stone. The Parthians reign for nearly 5 centuries, yet they leave behind little that glitters. No grand inscriptions, no temples of column and flame, but in this absence you feel a deeper presence. They are not remembered for what they built, but for what they preserved. They kept the land intact. They held the thread. Even their decline is gentle. The Sassanids rise, more centralized, more structured, more ceremonial. The Parthians fade, not in disgrace, but like sand after wind, quiet, undramatic, complete. You lie down now beneath the desert stars. The wind presses softly over your face. You imagine a Parthian horseman watching the same constellations, listening to the same wind, his bow across his lap. His thoughts as unspoken as the land, and as your eyes begin to close, the thought drifts. In like desert breath, some powers do not shout. Some empires leave no marble, but in silence they keep the road open and the memory breathing. The land turns again. You feel it not as a shudder, but as a long, slow inhale. The Parthians have drifted into dusk, their hoofprints fading into windswept trails. And now something new begins to glow beneath the eastern sky, not entirely new, but renewed. A light rekindled from ancient embers. A crown rising not from gold alone, but from belief, from order, from the sacred rhythm of fire. You are walking across the Fars plateau once more, where mountains cradle valleys like quiet cradles. Villages still whisper in the old tongues. The Zoroastrian flame, guarded for centuries, flickers stronger now in stone altars, no longer hidden. And from this soil, ancient, stubborn, filled with memory, the Sassanid Empire emerges. Its founder, Ardashir, does not rise as a stranger. He is a descendant of priests, guardians of fire and cosmic law. Yet he is also a soldier, firm, brilliant, filled with vision. From the temple city of Istakar, near the ruins of Persepolis, he gathers the scattered and weary, and speaks not of vengeance, but of restoration. You walk with him now beside riverbeds that once fed royal gardens. He listens to the stories of Cyrus, the flame of Zoroaster, the whisper of forgotten kings. He does not seek to recreate the past, but to honor it, to draw its spirit forward into stone, law, and legacy. Under his reign and that of his son Shapur I, the new empire blooms. The Sassanid crown is tall, elaborate, adorned with crescents, wings, and divine emblems. Yet its weight is not only metal, it carries the idea of light, that the ruler is not a god, but chosen by Ahura Mazda, the force of truth. The king's duty is not just to govern, but to balance the world, to support justice, protect the weak, and uphold sacred order, known in Persian as Asha. You stand now at the edge of Ctesiphon, a capital city that glows not with marble, but with harmony. The Tak, Kasra, its great vaulted arch, looms above you, vast, elegant, curving into the sky like a rising thought. No nails hold it, no beams bind it. It is built on knowledge alone. You walk beneath its curve and feel time flow like wind. Through architecture, the Sassanids are builders of more than cities. They raise temples of fire, schools of philosophy, and networks of roads that stretch across the empire like threads of thought. They refine medicine, astronomy, mathematics. Libraries swell with texts translated from India, Greece, and older Persian schools. You enter one of these halls, stone cool beneath your feet, and hear scholars murmuring in Middle Persian, Aramaic, Sanskrit. This is not just empire. It is inheritance made visible. Yet the crown is not without conflict. The Sassanids face Rome, now Byzantium, again and again. Borders shift, blood is spilled, but the empire does not crack. You witness the battles, yes, Shapur's triumph, over Valerian, whose defeat is carved in cliffs at Nakshi Rostam. But the greater struggle lies in ideas. Religion is no longer a private flame. It becomes state soul. Zoroastrianism rises now to the center of life. Fire temples gleam along hillsides. Priests, magi, hold influence, tending not only to spirit, but to law. The Avesta, Zoroastrian scripture, is compiled, clarified, taught. You enter a temple and feel the solemn presence of its sacred fire. It does not flicker with chaos, but burns with still certainty. Prayers are chanted slowly, like breath drawn through the body of the land itself. This brings strength, but also rigidity. Tolerance narrows. Other faiths, once free to flow in the Parthian winds, now face walls. Christians, Manichaeans, Jews, Buddhists, some are embraced, others, depending on the moment and monarch, are pressed. There is balance, and there is boundary. The flame both warms and warns. You see the court of Khosrau, known as Anushirvan the Just, centuries after Ardashir. He is a philosopher king, a reformer, a lover of Greek learning and Indian logic. Under him, the Sassanid world reaches its cultural peak. Justice is codified. Art flows in intricate silverwork, in poetry, in music tuned to the soul's deep harmonies. You visit his halls. The air is full of discussion, ethics, metaphysics, governance. The empire pulses like a well-tuned instrument. His vision is not just political, but civilizational. Iran as a center of soul and system, a mirror to Rome, not only in power, but in wisdom. But time does not stand still. Beyond the empire's eastern edges, new forces gather, the Hephthalites, the rising Turks, and far to the west, in the deserts of Arabia, a new voice begins to rise, not in empire yet, but in revelation. But that is still a chapter away. For now, you sit in a stone garden, surrounded by fruit trees and songbirds. A silver plate rests beside you, etched with scenes of royal hunts and mythic beasts. But it is not the hunt that holds you. It is the quiet between stories. The moment when the air carries memory instead of music. The Sassanids do not rule forever, but they linger in law, in art, in ritual. Even when their temples dim, their vision remains woven into the silt of Iran's spirit. You lie back now beneath a carved ceiling, the stars beginning to show between its beams, and as sleep begins to settle, you hear a final whisper. To rule is to burn brightly without consuming. To govern is to listen not just to power, but to meaning. And the truest crowns are shaped by fire, but worn with light. It begins not with armies, but with verses, not with empires, but with a single voice, rising from the sands of Arabia, carrying words that feel both thunderous and tender. You are far from Persia, now south, across the desert, in the shade of date palms where a prophet speaks of one God, of justice, of mercy. He is called Muhammad, and his message moves like wind across dunes, slow at first, then suddenly everywhere. Persia does not yet tremble. The Sassanid crown still gleams. Its temples still burn with the sacred flame. But far away, something begins to shift in the bones of history. And soon, the wind changes direction. You walk now across the Zagros mountains, down into the plains, where armies once passed in silence. The year is 636. A battle begins at Qadisiyah, where Arab warriors, simple in dress, rich in spirit, meet the mighty Sassanid legions. It is not only a battle of swords, but of worlds. And Persia, for the first time in centuries, begins to bend. Cities fall, gently Ctesiphon. The great capital is not razed, but emptied. The treasures are taken, the royal court flees east. But the land itself does not scream, it absorbs, it watches. You might expect resistance, rebellion, collapse, but something different happens. You pass through town after town, Ray Hamadan, Isfahan, and in each, the fire temples grow quiet, yet the people continue. The conquerors are not destroyers. They are carriers of a new rhythm Islam, but not a sharp break, more a realignment. Persia listens. It does not forget Zoroaster, but it hears echoes of his light in the Koranes verses. Justice, truth, one creator. The echoes are familiar. Islam arrives not like a flood, but like rain. At first, it trickles through society. The jizya tax marks those who do not convert, but it does not erase them. Zoroastrians remain, as do Jews, Christians, Manichaean. For a time, coexistence breathes through city streets. Arabic becomes the language of rule. Persian survives in kitchens and poems. You hear both in the market. You feel no rupture-only layering. The Umayyads rule from afar. Damascus seems distant. Their governance is stern, imperial. But in time, another dynasty will rise. The Abbasids, and they will look to Persia not only as territory, but as soul. But even before dynasties change, something stirs inside Persian hearts. Islam has arrived, yes. But soon, Persian Islam will rise in return. You visit the small towns where scholars are born. Tabaristan, Nishepa, Kufa. Children study both Quran and logic. The old Zoroastrian ideas of light and balance quietly blend with new teachings. A Persian named Salman al-Farsi, companion of the Prophet himself, is remembered as a bridge between worlds. You see his story not in stone, but in memory, between elders, whispered between prayers. The Persian mind does not simply adopt Islam, it enriches it. New philosophies, grammatizilat, reasoning, Sufi, mysticism, ethical treatises that carry the grace of ancient wisdom and the freshness of divine revelation. The flame of Zoroaster is no longer lit in temples, but you feel it flicker in thought and intention, and then the poets begin to rise. You hear their voices forming in the hills of Khorasan. Not yet famous, not yet gathered, but soon they will sing in Persian, once more not the imperial Persian of Darius, but the new Persian softened by Arabic letters, yet shaped by Persian spirit. This rebirth begins not in palaces, but in hearts. As centuries pass, Islam becomes not only a religion in Persia, but a home. Mosques rise beside old ruins. The call to prayer echoes where once kings ruled. You sit beneath a dome tiled with turquoise, where light pours in through geometric windows. The voice of the muezzin is not stern, it is slow, round, rhythmic, like the turning of stars. The desert has bloomed. Persia does not vanish in this new world, it shapes it. The Abbasid court becomes Persian in language, custom, thought. Ministers, scientists, poets all emerge from the soil of Iran. Baghdad glows not as an Arab city alone, but as a city built with Persian stone, Persian hands, Persian dream, and in villages, life continues. Farmers pray 5 times a day, as they always looked to the sky. Children memorize both hadith and the poems of Ferdowsi, who has not yet been born, but whose spirit is rising. Islam did not come to erase, it came to carry, and Iran, in turn, carried Islam forward into art, into language, into spirit. You lie down now in the courtyard of an old mosque. The stars wheel above you slowly. The ground is still warm from the day. A breeze brings the scent of earth, tea, and distant prayers. You do not feel conquest here. You feel change low, profound, and breathing. And as your eyes begin to close, a single phrase remains. Sometimes the strongest faith is not shouted, but planted, and the softest rains can awaken an entire world. The land is quiet now, but not forgotten. Beneath orchards heavy with pomegranates and hills washed in morning light, something begins to stir again. Not a sword, not a banner, but a voice wrapped in rhyme. A voice that echoes ancient names not spoken for centuries. You walk slowly through the meadows of Tos, a small town in the northeast, where the wind carries not only scent but syllables, words that remember. Here is born Abulkasim Ferdowsi, a farmer's son, a man not raised in palaces, but in the folds of memory. His mind is vast, his heart full, and in his soul he carries a task far heavier than any crown: to revive a language, to remember a world. You walk beside him now through his orchard, the leaves brushing your hands, the earth soft beneath your feet. He speaks of kings, not the ones who rule his day, but the ones who once walked in myth and dignity. He speaks of Rostam, of Zahak, of Jamshid and Kaveh. He speaks of fire and justice, of dragons and betrayal, of empire not as territory but as story. And he writes. He writes for decades, alone, patient, persistent. He gathers tales, not to escape reality, but to root his people within it. His words are not fantasy, they are medicine. As Arabic fills the courts and religion governs, the air, he gently, with golden verse, brings Persian back to its center. Not as resistance, as remembrance. The work is called Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. You open its pages with him. The letters curve like vines, the meter beats like footsteps, and in every line there is weight, of memory, of loss, of glory. Long buried, it is not history in the dry sense. It is poetic truth. It tells of creation, of the first man, of battles fought not just with blade but with fate. You are drawn in, and so are his people. In a time when rulers spoke in foreign tongues and power shifted like sand, the Shahnameh becomes an anchor. Children memorize its lines, elders recite it by the fire. The nation, though ruled by outsiders, begins to feel its heart beat again, steady, proud, alive. You sit now in a village square as night falls. A nakal, a storyteller, stands with a drum. Around him, men and women, boys and girls, gather under the stars. He begins to chant, not from holy text, but from Ferdowsi. He tells of Sohab, the son who did not know his father, of Sit, the winged healer, of kingdoms lost and honor regained. The audience does not move. The story is not fiction, it is themselves, returned. Ferdowsi writes for 30 years, 30 winters and 30 springs. And when he finishes, the language of Persia has not just survived, it has blossomed. From court to market, from scholar to shepherd, the rhythm returns. It no longer hides behind translation. It sings in its own voice. But his life is not easy. When he presents the Shahnameh to the court of Mahmud of Ghazni, he hopes for reward, not of gold, but of gratitude. But Mahmud does not see its worth. He sees a poem, not a pillar. And Ferdowsi is dismissed, his payment reduced to insult. He grows old in quiet bitterness. He dies before his work is honored, and yet time softens the wound. You visit his tomb now, raised long after his death, in a peaceful garden where roses bloom. The walls are carved with verses, the same ones that once rose from his heart in solitude. Children run through the colonnades, tourists walk with hushed wonder, and the wind, the same wind from his orchard, still hums his lines through. The leaves Ferdowsi did not rebuild Persepolis. He did not wear a crown, but he restored a soul. He gave Iran not its land, but its language, and in doing so, he made it immortal. You lie down now beneath the starlit sky of Tos. The earth is quiet, but the words still drift in the dark. Long live this land and this soul, as long as time still turns. The breath of a nation is not always held in law. but in lines passed from lips in shadow and light. A story can be a shelter, a poem, a throne. The sky does not warn you. There is no roll of thunder, no cloud curled like a fist. The horizon is clear, the air still, but beneath it, across the steppes of Central Asia, hooves are stirring, thousands upon thousands, beating in rhythm with the breath of a world about to change. And soon they come, not as kings, not as pilgrims, but as wind made flesh, as flame riding horseback. The Mongols arrive in Persia with no history here, no ancient ties, no shared myths. Their leader, Genghis Khan, does not speak of Zoroaster or Cyrus or even conquest. He speaks only of destiny, of breaking what resists, of reshaping the earth. You walk through Khwarazm first, where merchants once traded silk and grain, and here no market now. Only ash, only silence. The cities fall not by siege, but by wave, sudden, brutal, complete. Nisapu Ira. Ray names that once hummed with poetry and prayer are leveled into memory, and not even memory feels safe. You witness what no traveller should. Fire poured on libraries, scholars cut down mid-verse, minarets pulled like weeds. It is not only a fall of walls, it is a collapse of breath. The Mongols move not with cruelty, but with clarity. Their laws are strict, their message simple: submit or vanish. There is no court poetry, no negotiations drawn in tea or silk, only order, brutal and brief. But Persia does not vanish. It recoils, yes, bends under the shock. But deep beneath the devastation, something watches, something waits. You travel now to Moraga, and you see something strange. Amid the ruin, a tower rises. Not a fortress, but an observatory. Not a cannon, but a telescope. For here, under Mongol rule, a man named Nasir Oldin Tusi convinces the new conquerors to turn their eye toward the heavens. Science flickers back to life, shyly, but undeniably, and so begins one of history's strangest turns. The Mongols, once destroyers, begin to listen. They adopt Islam. They marry into Persian families. Their descendants, the ilk, start to rebuild what their grandfathers tore apart. They commission mosques. They gather books. They preserve languages they once could not pronounce. You walk now through Tabriz, under the rule of Ghazan Khan, and find beauty returning. Gardens are planted, paper is inked. The pain does not disappear, but it begins to root into something deeper, resilience shaped into renaissance. This is Persia's strange gift. It bends like reed, never breaks. It absorbs even the sharpest shock and turns it in time into poetry. The Ilkhanids rule not forever, but they leave behind something unexpected. Maps filled in with new stars. Schools that teach Aristotle alongside Quran. A memory not only of fire, but of what rose from its ashes. You wander now through the ruins of a madrasa, rebuilt after the flames. The calligraphy across its dome is Persian, but written with Mongol funding. You smile at the paradox. Even destruction, it seems, can become a patron if the spirit survives. And Persia's spirit always survives. Even the most broken sky can offer stars once the wind passes. You rest now in a valley once scarred by war, where green has returned slowly, lovingly. Children laugh. A shepherd leads goats past what remains of a shattered tower. No one speaks of Genghis. No one dares forget. But the wounds have become part of the story, a story that never stops telling itself. and as sleep begins to wrap around you, gently. As a mother with a blanket, you hear the earth whisper beneath you. Even the fiercest horseman must dismount. Even the sharpest blade blunts against the silence of time. And from broken stone, new roots always grow. The world does not fully heal, not after such storms, but it remembers how to shine. The land is still scarred. Valleys where cities once stood now cradle silence, and the rivers, once filled with ink and trade, flow thinner. Yet into this landscape of half-light and deep breath, another figure rises, fierce, flawed, and full of vision. His name is Tamerlane, or Timur, and you hear of him first through rumor. A lame man from Samarkand, born in dust but burning with fire. He is not Persian by blood, but Persia, as always, is the place where empires dream and where dreamers build. You follow him now, not by choice, but by the tide of history. His armies move fast and wide. His hands, though twisted by injury, hold cities like stones. He is conqueror and collector both, a man who levels palaces and then rebuilds them in gold. The blood he spills fills rivers. But amid the ruin, his vision gathers, not in politics, but in art. For Timur, beauty is not luxury, it is command. He sees domes not as temples, but as mirrors to heaven. He brings artisans from Isfahan, from Shiraz, from Tabriz, carries them to Samarkand like seeds in his palm. And from their hands bloom the gardens of Persian architecture, turquoise domes, flowing tiles, words of light scripted in lapis blue. You stand now in a city reborn, not in power, but in pattern. The Registan glows at dusk, each madrasa a vessel of symmetry and devotion. The shapes are familiar. Pointed arches, muqarnas ceilings, mosaic flowers. But they are not nostalgic. They are proudly Persian, lifted by Mongol might, but carved in the language of Iran's soul. And though Timur's court sits in Transoxiana, his dreams draw from Persia's past, from the kings of the Shonmei, from Sassanid radiance, from the geometry of Zoroastrian balance. His descendants will carry this even further. Among them, the most gifted is Shah Rukh, and beside him, a prince unlike others, Ulugh Beg. You follow Ulugh Beg, not to the battlefield, but to the stars. He builds an observatory so large it seems to drink from the sky. There, in Samarkand, Persian astronomers and mathematicians map the heavens with new precision. You trace their charts with your finger, rows of numbers, arcs of planetary dance, and realize, even in a world shaken by swords, the mind keeps reaching upward. This is the paradox of the Timurids, violence in origin, yet beauty in legacy. Their cities glitter, their poetry deepens, their libraries swell with calligraphy and ink. From the bloodied soil, they grow gardens of math, music, miniature painting. You sit in a scriptorium now, where a young artist adds a speck of gold to a leaf. His hands tremble, not with fear, but with care. The Persian language, nearly muted after conquest, now sings again, rich, flowering. You hear the verses of Hafez, of Jami, and above all, the voice of Rumi, whose words swirl like the stars. Ulugh Beg watches. These poets write not in defiance, but in flow. They do not fight, they reflect. And through them, the Persian soul shines with a light made from pain, forgiveness, and faith. Not all is peace. The land remains divided. Local dynasties rise and fall. Rival Sufi orders jostle. Mongol bloodlines mix with Turkic pride. But amid the shifting, one truth stays. Persia survives through beauty. You visit Herat, under Shah Rock's court, and see the peak of this flowering. Here, artists perfect the Persian miniature, each page a universe. Histories are copied with lines so fine they seem sung rather than scribed. The workshops are silent, save for brushes whispering against paper. And through all this, the cities still bear scars. You see the half-buried stones of Nishapur, the ghosts of schools that once held thousands. But above them rise shrines, gardens, music, and thought. The land does not forget, but it does forgive, again and again. By the end of the Timurid age, Persia is not a single empire, but a woven world. Its rulers come and go, its cities burn and rise. But its memory, its style, its sound, they ripple across time like a silk dropped into water. You lie now in a tiled courtyard in twilight. The stars are just beginning to shimmer. Somewhere a flute plays. The tile beneath you is cold, smooth, patterned with vines and verses. You run your fingers over the design. It is too complex to have been born from destruction alone, and just as your breath slows, the thought comes softly. Even after storms, a mirror can be made from the broken shards. And when beauty returns, it does not erase the past. It reflects it. The land breathes in again. Slowly, the storm of Timur has passed. Its ashes folded into tile, poem and memory. Cities rebuild not with speed, but with care. Gardens bloom again. Mosques are swept. Scholars return to their scrolls. But something is still unsettled, like a heartbeat waiting for its rhythm. Persia has survived many empires, ruled by Arabs, Turks, Mongols, yet still has not fully named itself now. From the mists of Azerbaijan, from a Sufi order once clothed in red turbans and chanting in mountain shrines, comes a flame. Small at first, then growing, fanned by lineage and longing. This is no mere dynasty. It is a claim, a cry, a transformation. And its bearer is a boy king named Ismail. You walk beside him now, though he is young, perhaps 14, and already the wind bends toward him. His words carry more than command. They carry belief. He declares himself Shah, and more than that, the shadow of God, descended from the line of Imam Ali, the rightful heir to the Prophet's spirit. And with this, he kindles a fire that will burn across Persia for centuries to come. Ismail does not just rule, he redefines. Under him and the Safavid rulers who follow, Persia is remade into a Shia nation. For centuries, Sunni Islam was the dominant path, broad, multifaceted, familiar. But now, the 12 Shia faith rises from minority silence into state creed. The change is not gradual. It is firm, at times fierce. Shrines are rebuilt. Public prayers change. Scholars are invited from southern Iraq and Lebanon to shape law, ritual, and theology. You sit now in a madrasa where young students learn not only Quran, but the names of the 12 Imams, the tales of Karbala, the grief and resistance written into the fabric of this belief. The walls bear calligraphy not only of divine verses, but of mourning black ink for Hussein, red for his blood. It is not a faith of power. It is a faith of memory, of sacrifice, of waiting. Persia, through this turn, becomes not just a place, but a personality. It separates itself from its neighbors, from Sunni Ottomans to the west, from Mughal India to the east. It becomes itself in a way it hasn't been in centuries. But this is not only about theology. The Safavids build cities, too, and none greater than Isfahan. You enter it now at dawn. The sky is brushed with saffron and silver. The city opens around you like a verse, wide boulevards, blue domes, quiet courtyards, and in its heart, the Nakshi Jahan Square, image of the world. It is not just grand, it is harmonic palace, mosque, market, and garden in a single, breathing rhythm. Shah Abbas I, the greatest Safavid ruler, dreams this into being. He is a planner, a patron, a quiet strategist. He moves the capital here not just for safety, but for symbolism. Isfahan becomes a mirror of heaven, its architecture reflecting both divine order and Persian taste. The Shah Mosque, with its 7-color tiles and echoing dome, feels not like a place you enter, but a space that enters you, and nearby. The Lotfullah Mosque, quiet, elegant, built not for sermons but for reflection, the kind of place where the sacred hums rather than shouts. You stand inside its dome and feel time slow. Light moves like silk across the floor, nothing in excess, everything measured. The Safavid era is not without shadow. The conversion to Shia Islam brings pressure, sometimes persecution. Sufis, once celebrated, are pushed aside. Sunnis often face exclusion. The empire grows strong but also guarded. Yet within these borders, identity crystallizes. Language, faith, art, all woven into a Persian weave that will last far beyond its rulers. You hear the music of this time, the soft sita, the poems of Saib Tabrizi, the lyrics that wander between divine longing and earthly loss. You read miniature paintings, not just as decoration, but as quiet sermons of harmony. You see carpets stretched in workshops, each not a meditation. Even the cups of tea in Isfahan carry more than warmth. They carry continuity. The world shifts. Outside, the Ottomans press at borders. The Portuguese arrive by sea. But the Safavid flame holds steady for over 2 centuries. Even as decline begins, weak successes, inner conflict, tribal strife, the soul of the empire outlives the throne. You walk through Isfahan again now, late at night. The square is almost empty. The stars are soft overhead. Somewhere, the call to prayer drifts not as command, but as comfort. You look up at the dome of the mosque, and its pattern seems endless. 1,000 blue petals circling a golden center. You feel small and held, and just before sleep folds you in. A final thought comes. To shape a nation is to light a sacred fire and guard it through storm and stillness. To belong is to believe, not only in gods, but in beauty, in sorrow, and in the echo of home. The flame does not go out at once. It flickers first, curls back, withdraws. The Safavid world, which once glowed like enamel under the sun, begins to crack not from one blow, but from many small fractures. You feel it in the silence after ceremony, in the hesitation of soldiers, in the weightless air above Isfahan's golden domes. No empire ends with a whisper, but this one ends with a sigh, long, mournful, inevitable. You walk the streets of Isfahan now, years after Shah Abbas, and the rhythm has changed. The markets still bustle, but something is missing. The art continues, but with less conviction. The courts echo with formality, not vision. The rulers, grown weak, play at power without hearing the drum of history beneath their feet. And beyond the mountains, others are watching. The Afghans, a tribal people long bruised by empire, rise with fury and faith. Their leader, Mahmud, does not seek glory for himself alone. He carries resentment of exclusion, of insult, of faiths divided. He sees the Persian crown not as sacred, but vulnerable. In 1722, they march. You hear their footsteps like a drumbeat in the dust. They surround Isfahan. No great battle breaks the city, it is hunger that does. Inside the walls, people starve. The great Safavid dynasty ends not with a sword, but with an open gate. Shah Sultan Hussein surrenders, and with him, centuries of order fall like a broken seal. You stand in the palace gardens, now overgrown, and feel the wind carrying confusion. The Afghans rule, but they do not belong. Their authority chafes. The Persian people resist not with arms, but with absence. No loyalty, no reverence, no root. At the same time, the Ottomans to the west and the Russians to the north press forward like vultures, sensing weakness. Borders blur, lands are lost. Persia becomes a chessboard of foreign moves, where locals struggle to hold the center. But even in collapse, something stirs from the northeast. From Khorasan, harsh and vast, rises a soldier unlike others, a former bandit, a man carved from war and instinct. His name is Nader. You meet him not in court, but in camp. His armor is plain, his speech direct. He fights not for poetry, but for restoration, and yet he becomes a force of legend. He drives out the Afghans. He reclaims lands from the Ottomans. He defeats the Mughals in India, returns with the peacock throne, and seems, for a moment, to rebuild what was lost. You ride with his army across snowy passes and burning plains. His ambition is endless, his victories vast, but his rule is brittle. As Shah Nader becomes suspicious, harsh, consumed by control, he blinds his son, executes allies, trust dissolves. Around him like sand in water. In 1747, he is assassinated in his sleep. No dynasty follows. No dream remains. The land fractures again. You move through Mazandaran, Fars, Azerbaijan, each ruled by local khans, tribal leaders, ambitious generals. Persia becomes a mosaic without grout, held together by memory, not governance. The Ottomans press again. The Russians sign treaties and redraw borders. In the mountains, old dynasties try to breathe life into forgotten claims. And still, amid the chaos, poets write. Calligraphers ink letters onto empty parchment. The sacred language, Persian, holds the center, even when no crown can dot you. Meet villagers who remember the Shahs in sighs, merchants who speak 3 languages and none fluently, Sufis who carry their prayer beads through changing flags. And always the land endures. Rivers do not forget their paths, nor stars their turning. The Safavid past lingers like scent, sweet, aching, unreachable. Isfahan still stands, though its tiles crack in winter frost. Shiraz still sings. Mashhad still glows with pilgrimage. The Persian identity, though bruised and splintered, still pulses with quiet force, and in time a new dynasty will rise. But, for now, you lie beneath a fig tree in a garden gone untended. A breeze lifts the leaves. A child recites verses of Hafez nearby. The world is not whole, but it is alive. And in this moment between empires, between certainties, between selves, a final thought falls over you like dusk. Even when crowns fall, and cities are traded like coins, the heart remembers its rhythm. The land listens for a voice that still speaks its name, not as ruler, but as home. The mirror doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the full truth either. You enter the age of the Khayars as though stepping into a house of reflections, polished. Halls, gilded thrones, shimmering chandeliers, and yet, beneath the surface, something flickers out of sync. The Safavid world is long gone. The Zand dynasty, gentle but brief, has passed like perfume on wind, and now comes a new line. From the northern steppes, the Qajars, tribal, Turkic, ambitious. They claimed the throne, but it is not a throne of old majesty. It is a seat trying to reclaim lost meaning. You walk into Tehran, no longer a village, but a capital. It is dust-ringed and restless, not yet glowing. Yet, from its core, a new kind of monarchy rises. The first Qajar ruler, Aga Muhammad Khan, is cruel and calculated, a man of vengeance, not poetry. He crushes rivals, blinds enemies, rebuilds authority through fear. But he is murdered before peace can find him. Then comes Fath Ali Shah, and the mirror brightens. He paints his rule in oil portraits and opulence. You see him now in a gilded hall, beard cascading, jewels blazing, surrounded by concubines, courtiers, and calligraphers. He wants the world to see his empire, his beauty, his legacy. But what is seen is not always what is secure. Beyond the palace walls, the world is changing. Europe has begun its long descent into the East, not with swords, but with maps, treaties, and trade. The British and Russians eye Persia as chessboard. They do not ask permission. They send advisors, demands, and railroads. They draw lines on paper and call them borders. You feel the land shift again, not through war, but through quiet theft. The Treaty of Gulistan, the Treaty of Turkmenchay, names whispered with bitterness. Persia loses lands in the Caucasus. The empire shrinks, and with it, its confidence. You see the Qajar court trying to keep pace, building ministries, inviting foreign teachers, erecting glass palaces. The Golestan Palace rises in glimmering form, its walls inlaid with mirror fragments, so many pieces that you can't see yourself clearly, only multiplied. This is the mirror age, shimmering, fragmented, distracted, and yet not without. Awakening, you walk the streets of Tehran in the days of Nasr al-Din Shah, the longest ruling Qajar. He loves photography. He carries a camera. He builds a museum. He travels to Europe and returns both dazzled and disoriented. He wants to modernize, but not to lose control. He opens schools, but tightens censorship. He courts science, but fears democracy. But from the cafes and seminaries comes a whisper. He cannot silence freedom. You sit in a tea house in Tabriz. The air is thick with smoke and ideas. Intellectuals argue softly. Should Persia follow constitutionalism? Should there be law above the king? The ideas do not come from Paris alone. They grow from Iranian soil, from poets, from philosophers, from the pain of watching the empire shrink while the people remain unheard. The tobacco protest of 1891 awakens the people. A concession sold to Britain is met with a religious fatwa. A moment when merchants, clerics, and citizens move together. Tobacco burns in protest. The Shah withdraws the deal, and something deep stirs in the national soul, the sense that voice matters. You feel the ground prepare for revolution, and it comes. In 1906, the Persian constitutional revolution, clerics, merchants, students, and reformers unite to demand a majlis, a parliament, a constitution. You stand outside the new assembly as crowds cheer and scholars debate. For the first time in centuries, power is questioned. The mirror of monarchy cracks, but reflection alone is not enough. The world outside interferes again. The Russians invade the north. The British divide the south. The Shah resists, then flees. The parliament is bombarded. The dream falters. You walk now through shattered glass, ideas unfinished, courage punished, but not erased. The Qajar dynasty survives a little longer, but the crown is tarnished. Ahmad Shah, the last of their line, is young, uncertain, and exiled before he ever rules fully. And yet, something lasting remains. Persian identity has changed, not erased, expanded. It now includes debate, includes newspapers, elections, criticism, dreams written not in royal edicts, but in pamphlets, letters, speeches. The soul of the nation is no longer contained in palaces. It lives in people's minds. You return once more to Golstan Palace, but this time, as the halls stand still, dust has gathered on the mirrors, but the light still dances across them. When the sun enters, the fragments shine not with perfection, but with memory. And as you lie beneath a cypress tree in the courtyard, the wind carries the scent of rosewater and smoke. You hear a child reciting poetry, and a man nearby reading a newspaper aloud. There is confusion, yes, loss, but also motion, also hope, and in this in-between, this flickering glass, a final thought glows. A mirror does not lead, but it teaches us to look, to see what we are, what we hide, and what, in fragments, we may become. The sun rises differently now, not through domes or lattice, but through smog and scaffolding. Persia has not vanished, but it no longer looks like the Persia you've walked through. The scent of ink and rosewater is replaced by oil. The footpaths of merchants are replaced by avenues of cars. And the empire, the ancient idea of it, has been folded into a new word, nation. You arrive as the Qajars fall away, their reign too fragile, too entangled in foreign shadows. Into their place steps a man from the military ranks, deliberate, stern, self-made, Reza Khan, not of royal blood, not of poetry, but of order. He does not walk softly. He marches. In 1925, he becomes Reza Shah Pahlavi, founding a new dynasty, not born of divine right, but of ambition and vision. You see him in photographs more than in paintings, tall, rigid, with eyes that do not drift. He sees Iran not as memory, but as mission. The first part of his mission is to reclaim dignity. The British and Russians have divided the land too long. Reza Shah wants borders strong, railways straight, an army that salutes only him. He abolishes the old titles of tribal chiefs. He pushes clerics from court. He builds ministries, factories, schools. You travel now through Tehran, which swells under his will. Boulevards lined with concrete, statues of Cyrus raised, museums filled with the glories of Persepolis. He chooses the Achaemenid past as his mirror, not the mystical Safavids, not the delicate Qajars, but the kings of stone and inscription. It is a secular nationalism, crafted with granite hands, but every forge creates both tools and wounds. Reza Shah demands modernity fast, unveiling women, banning traditional dress, closing religious seminaries. Many cheer, many mourn. Tradition is not erased, but it is silenced, forced to wait. You visit a school in a provincial town. Girls are reading French novels, boys learning engineering. But in the next room, a mullah sits alone, his seminary now shuttered. The country is moving forward, but not everyone moves at the same pace. Then comes war, the Great War, beyond borders. World War II shakes the world. Though Iran declares neutrality, the Allies do not trust Reza Shah's ties to Germany. In 1941, they invade. Reza Shah is forced to abdicate. His son, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, takes the throne, young, polished, uncertain. You walk beside him now in his early reign. He tries to balance the shadows of superpowers with the sunlight of sovereignty. But beneath his crown lies an anxious heart. He wants greatness, but he fears descent. His rule begins with caution. Then comes a storm. In 1951, a man named Mohammed Mossadegh becomes prime minister. Brilliant, emotional, committed to one ideal. Oil belongs to Iran. He nationalizes the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. The West is stunned. The British, enraged. The Americans, anxious. You stand in the streets during those days. Crowds roar in support of Mossadegh. There is a feeling for a moment of true ownership, but power does not like to be unplugged. In 1953, a coup orchestrated by the CIA and MI6 removes Mossadegh. The Shah returns with firm backing and firmer control. Now begins the second Pahlavi age, louder, faster, more glittering. Mohammad Reza Shah dreams big. He launches the White Revolution, land reform, women's suffrage, literacy drives. He opens the gates to industry, invites Western companies, builds modern cities. The economy grows. High-rises shimmer beside mosques. Television flickers. In village homes, but the light blinds. You feel the tension building beneath the surface of wealth. Something coils. The king speaks of ancient kings, of Persepolis rising, but many feel erased, not honored. Rural traditions fade under tractors. Religion, long silenced, begins to stir again in whispers and sermons. And the secret police, Savak, moves quietly through homes, universities, poetry readings. Fear returns. In 1971, the Shah hosts a festival in Persepolis, celebrating 2,500 years of monarchy. Foreign dignitaries dine under crystal chandeliers in the desert. Yet beyond the banquet tents, many Iranians go hungry. The disconnect widens. You walk through Tehran in the late 1970s. Graffiti scrawls on walls. Students chant slogans. Cassettes of sermons circulate secretly. The voice of Ayatollah Khomeini, long exiled, returns not in person but in sound. His words, once distant, grow familiar, and then revolution. The streets are full, not just of protesters, but of possibility. Women in chadders stand beside Marxist students. Bazaar merchants fund underground newspapers. The Shah flees. The monarchy ends. The Pahlavi crown is laid down, not in peace, but in judgment. And yet, the story of Iran is never a clean break. The legacy of the Pahlavis is not simple. They brought progress and control, pride and loss, steel and silence. The roads they built still stretch across the country. The museums still hold the past they tried to protect. The contradictions they embodied between East and West, tradition and modernity, state and soul remain living questions. You lie now beneath the night sky, far from palaces and parliaments. The wind hums across the Zagros hills. Above, stars blink, not in judgment, but in patience. And as the final chapter of this journey settles around you, the last lines drift gently into thought. A crown is not the end. It is a pause between breaths. Nations are not built in gold or steel, but in the dreams they carry forward, even when broken, even when blurred. The story does not sleep, it waits. Inside you, so now you rest. The footsteps of kings have faded. The market's quiet. The prayers folded into evening air. You have walked across deserts and through libraries, through gardens perfumed with jasmine and into cities made of flame and silence. You have watched empires rise with gold and fall with dust. You have listened to poets whisper from paper and felt the pull of faith that bends but does not break. This is Iran, not just a place, but a pulse. Not only a land, but a memory that breathes. It is a country that has survived invasion, revolution, fracture, forgetting. And yet it endures, not just in borders, but in carpets woven by hand, in the curve of a Persian letter, in tea poured slow and stories told late into the night. You carry these centuries now in your chest, not as weight, but as warmth, each chapter a page in the book of your dreaming, each voice a thread in the long braid of a people who refuse to vanish. Let your breath soften now. Let the stories settle like snow. You are not in the past, but you were never far from it. For the soul of a place lives on in those who listen, and as sleep pulls you gently inward, a final whisper finds you beneath the stars. You have not only heard history, you have become part of its dream. Good night,